Welcome to Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back. Thank you for joining me in this episode. My name is Patrick and I'm Frack. Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back is a show where I discuss different aspects of fandom and how they relate to the gospel. We'll be going through an episode of My Hero Academia and connected to teachings from the Bible. The name of the show comes from my dad, who dubbed my brother and me Frick and Frack since we were kids. So I'm going to be covering episode 143 of My Hero Academia, entitled Let You Down. So in this episode, we get some really great moments of moving the story and series forward. This is a very pivotal episode in the beginning and in the start. And so the group of heroes, they're continuing their strategy against All for One. There's a lot of one of the things I love about this story arc and what's going on is you can see like the little chess pieces moving around and around, and I just really enjoy that. It's really fun and great to see how all of this is being put into place. Because one of the things that, in a previous episode, All for One mentioned was that he has an infinite, quote unquote, plans. And so if one fails, he moves on to the other because he's been working on that one. And so you can see this kind of planning on his part be put into play as well, because you find out in this episode that Aoyama and his family are not the only spies at UA. And so it's just really great to kind of see this kind of strategy and planning and everything being put out. And then same on the hero side as well. Then a really cool thing is that we get this new status quo for Spinner. In previous episodes, Spinner talks about how he is a heteromorph quirk person, and so that's why he looks like a lizard. And so, like I said, in previous episodes, he talks about how he was degraded and had people yelling at him and all sorts of prejudice against him, and put it out there in this My Hero Academia world of the travesty and the oppression that people who had heteromorph quirks faced. And so, but now that Spinner has taken the center stage among the villains, he has become an inspiration to other heteromorph persons, because they're finally getting to a place where they're being they have a hero to look up to, and that's in Spinner. And now granted, he's a villain, so that's leading to them becoming villains as well. And so it's one of those things where we just get that moment, and it's the same thing. And Spinner has a very similar story to Toga. In the very beginning of this episode, you see Toga going back to her family home, and all of the markings and everything, basically calling her like a vampire, and a bad person because of what her quirk does. When she drinks the blood of another person, she becomes that person. And if she truly loves that person, then she can also use their power. And so that's just kind of really fascinating in of itself. But here's the thing, though. She had to figure this out. She had to discover this, and people aren't going to take kindly to that. Blood's kind of important. And so anyway, so these two, Toga and Spinner, have this great connection and great parallel story of how this society looked down upon them because of what their quirks were and how they manifested them. Because I mean, you have to look at Toga. She's got vampire fangs, and like I said, Spinner's a lizard, and so he's going to stand out. So we were seeing all of this, the strategizing, the moves being made, but we don't know what they are. And then so the plan gets set in motion, and Midoriya and 1A, they head out, and we get some touching moments with others as they say farewell, especially with Midoriya and the two children that he means the world to them, like he's become their hero, and that's Eri and Kota. And so we get some other good moments, some great, screenshots of like Bakugo with his mom, Tentacle with the woman that Midori saved, different moments like that that are just great for those different kind of things. And it's just really great to, see those moments because these, for some of them, this might be the last time they see them. They don't know how this war is going to turn out. And so obviously the big moment that happens near the end of this episode is the setup for the start of the war. And so one of the things that the heroes have discovered is that All for One has some kind of truth telling quirk. And so getting around that was going to be difficult. They somehow managed to trick him to coming out to go against Midoriya and Aoyama's there. Now, they don't reveal how it's happened, but it has been teased. So if you've been paying attention, you might actually, if you haven't seen this episode before or read the manga of what happens next, or seen the other episodes that have happened, they've kind of teased it on how this is going to happen. So All for One goes there thinking that that Midoriya has been set up by Aoyama, but it's been the reverse. And so he's like, okay, well, it's just Midoriya versus me. Oh, wait, I've got all of my villains. Pats himself on the back. And because he's got that search quirk where he's able to tell where all of the most prominent heroes are located and how far away they are. So it's like, so even if he's able to get a message out, they're not going to be able to come help him in time. And so he brings out his Nomus, Dabi, Toga, Shigaraki, everyone else. And so, but then Midoriya says, wait, we got you, and reveals that uh, Kurogiri, they have somehow used Kurogiri's quirk, and he is warping in all of the heroes in Class 1A to come in and help fight the war in Japan. And so this is great. It's villains on one side, heroes on the other. And so they didn't really do this in the episode, but in the manga, you get like this really great full page, double page spread uh, of the heroes facing off against the villains. It's just really cool. And so if I think about it, I'll grab a screenshot of it from the Shonen Jump app. So those are the things that I wanted to talk about in this episode that are really good and really fascinating. But the biblical theme comes from Romans chapter 12, verse 20 through 21. This is what it says. To the contrary, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For by so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So there are a couple different short conversations that happen in this episode that really spoke to me and how they uh, worked out. So Uraraka and Todoroki both desire something different from their opponents, as does Midoriya. Uraraka had a rough end to the fight with Toga, and the in Jakku City, and the Gigantomachia incident, and things didn't go well, and Uraraka is lamenting that. Todoroki, he's like, I don't even know my older brother. I don't even know what kind of noodles he like. And if you go back to previous episodes of My Hero Academia, uh, you kind of learn that the what everyone's favorite kind of noodles are, and the Todoroki family is kind of a big deal. Or if you go back and read the manga as well. And Bakugo jokingly says it's probably udon because that'll be hot and it'll be spicy, that kind of thing. And so Todoroki says to Bakugo, well, then I'm going to have to try some with him someday. And so uh, Midoriya has that same sense with Shigaraki. He's like, there's this crying boy inside of Shigaraki that if someone had just reached out, who knows what might have happened. And same with Uraraka. She's like, man, I wish I could have been there for Toga when she was young, going through everything that she did to help her cope with what her quirk is. Uh, and they all do recognize the destruction that these villains have caused, the lives they've taken, and how damaged these villains are. And they said that they each recognizes, look, there's no getting past this, but they still need to be saved. And so they see a future for their villainous counterparts. Um, and so they recognize that these villains, the hero society let them down, and that's why they're going so far against it. And so, we got to think about, you know, in our day and day life, we don't necessarily, we really don't have supervillains that to go up against. We don't have people flinging fire or having destructive hands or being able to transform into someone else by drinking their blood. But we do have people that disagree with us, and we also have others who look down on others because they're different, because of the different color of their skin, or where they grew up, or who their parents were, or things like that. So we have to really kind of think about all of this in a way about how do we handle this situation when we are the ones facing someone's anger or hatred or oppression? Like, what are we supposed to do? Well, I look to Paul and the Romans writing, that the Christians were initially extremely oppressed, because of wanting to follow Jesus and not wanting to follow anyone else. And so, uh, and so when we have these times in our lives when we are facing backlash or we're facing anger from others for something that's really kind of out of our control, if we are a follower of Christ, it might happen. And for those who don't know Christ, you might be in a situation where you are feeling anger, and hatred and oppression being pressed upon you. Well, let's still look at what these three heroes wanted to do. They wanted to be there for their villain. Like, these people have killed people. They've destroyed an enormous amount of property, yet they still want to save them. Their goal is that they would love to not have to fight them. They would much rather save them. And so, it's the same that goes for us. So we're supposed to reach out and be kind in return. That even if they are heaping burning coals on our heads, but instead we're supposed to respond with kindness, because here's the thing that can uh, extinguish any kind of malice going on. And when you respond in kindness, it'll make a lot of people pause to be like, wait, you're not fighting back, you're not yelling obscenities at me. Instead, you're reacting with kindness. That's really kind of different. And that's what Jesus taught. That's what Paul taught. That's what the scriptures tell us to do. That it doesn't mean that we need to be a doormat, but it does mean that we're supposed to respond in kindness, because another part of the proverb that Paul is quoting is here is that, vengeance is mine of the Lord. So the Lord is going to handle all this at the end. But what we're supposed to do is to be an example of what Christ-like love is for others. So we're supposed to do that. So I hope that if you are facing moments of having burning coals heaped on your head, that you take this time to learn and respond in kindness, because that will change the world. So we think about, like, the internet is the worst about this, where it just gives us the opportunity to be keyboard warriors, as you might say. And so we can say anything we want on the internet because we got the safety of being the distance from one computer to the next, across the internet. So it's not like you can get punched in the face by typing some obscene thing on the internet, but instead we're called to respond in kindness. And so I want to encourage you to do that today. All right, so how would I rate this episode? It's a great episode, and now there's not particularly any action in it, except for Aoyama does shoot his beam at All for One, but I don't really particularly remember anything else other than that. So there's no action, so that's kind of a downer. But uh, this is so much a setup episode, and so you gotta love it because it's going to be high octane for from here on out because it's just going to be one thing after another. And so I just want to, I think I've got to give this episode a 5 because it's great. There's nothing wrong with it. Could there have been more action? Sure. But the moments, the character moments throughout this episode are just special. And they get the moments to, kind of have this breath, and everyone can talk about what war is like and what is coming. And it's just really a good moment to have for in this kind of a breather of an episode because it's perfect. And so it's a perfect 5. So, anyone with questions for me about the biblical lessons that I talked about in this episode, or other discussion ranging from anime, comics, or just anything in general, feel free to email me at fricketyfracktalkback@gmail.com, or reach out to me on Twitter at fricketyf, or at fricketyfrack on Instagram, Facebook, and Threads. So please rate, review, and subscribe. Remember that I love you, most importantly, God loves you, and go beyond plus ultra.